Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a fascinating and honestly highly debated economic essay by Xu Feng titled Eliminating Capitalists is a Nightmare for the Poor. Now, right off the bat, I want to be super clear. The concepts we're looking at today touch on some deeply polarizing economic and political theories. As always, my goal here isn't to take a side, endorse a viewpoint, or tell you what to think. Instead, we're just going to break down the author's specific arguments, map out his logic, and present the source material to you as clearly and neutrally as possible. We're going to explore the mechanics of his theory, look at the thought experiments he uses, and examine the real-world historical examples he claims prove his point. Okay, let's dive into this. The entire essay is built around answering one central paradox. How can eliminating capitalists be a nightmare for the poor? On the surface, the author acknowledges that this sounds completely counterintuitive, right? I mean, the common assumption is that without capitalists, there's no one around to exploit the working class, so logic would suggest that the poor should naturally get richer. But Xu Feng asks, so why instead would they actually become poorer? It's a bold question, and to answer it, he structures his argument into two distinct parts, a theoretical fable, followed by some big macroeconomic claims.
Section 1. The Capitalist Paradox.
Section 2. The Village Thought Experiment. To help us understand his core premise without all the baggage of real-world politics, Xu Feng strips everything down to a simple theoretical deduction. He basically creates a microcosm of society to illustrate exactly how he believes wealth creation actually functions at the ground level. So I want you to picture a remote, isolated village with exactly 100 impoverished residents. They're completely cut off from modern industry, barely surviving, and honestly, they don't even have sufficient food or clothing. This is our baseline. Absolute, stagnant poverty where nothing really changes from year to year. Then, suddenly, a catalyst is introduced. A capitalist from abroad arrives in this village. Step 1. He doesn't just hand out money. Instead, he builds a food processing factory, specifically an apple cider vinegar factory. Step 2, he encourages the locals to plant apple trees so he can buy their yield, and he directly hires 10 local workers, paying them steady wages. Step 3, because these locals suddenly have a stable income, they have disposable cash. They start spending it, which prompts other villagers to open small businesses to serve them. And finally, step 4, as money flows, the village infrastructure organically begins to grow. Just look at the ecosystem that develops from those initial wages. As the author points out, the factory workers and apple farmers start spending, and a whole new secondary economy springs to life. A restaurant opens up, then a barber shop, a tailor, a grocery store. The village begins to absolutely thrive. And it doesn't stop there. The economic boom starts attracting outsiders. People move in to open repair shops, someone builds a school, and eventually a bank opens. Roads get paved, buildings go up, and young people from neighboring areas even start moving in to marry the locals. Because of the capitalist initial investment, Xu Feng argues, the poor are no longer poor. The entire tide has lifted. Section 3. The Price of Jealousy. And this brilliantly illustrates the turning point of his fable. You see, human nature is complex, and prosperity alone isn't always enough to keep the peace when wealth inequality becomes so visible. The villagers realize that while their lives have definitely improved, the capitalist's life is in a completely different stratosphere. On side A, you've got the villagers. They're working themselves to the bone to afford 60-square-meter apartments and are riding around on tractors. But on side B, they discover the capitalist is living in a luxury villa abroad, flying first class, and driving an expensive car. The author points out that the villagers don't look at how far they've come. Instead, they become consumed by envy over the gap between side A and side B. They convince themselves that the capitalist only got his mansion by exploiting them and literally living off the blood of the working people. This culminates in a dramatic shift in the village's mindset. The villagers declare, and I'm quoting directly from Xu Feng's text here, "We must seize his wealth and drive him out of our village." So, in the name of pursuing common prosperity and eliminating exploitation, they decide to forcibly remove the very catalyst that sparked their economic boom in the first place. So the absolutely crucial point here is what happens after they get exactly what they wanted. The villagers celebrate driving him out, but that victory is incredibly short-lived. Let's walk through the fallout. Step 1, the capitalist leaves. Step 2, without his capital and management, the factory shuts down. And because the factory shuts down, no one buys the apples. The workers lose their wages, meaning they stop spending money at the restaurant, the tailor, and the barber. So one by one, all the small shops close. Step 3, incomes completely vanish. The outsiders who move there pack up and leave. The locals can no longer even afford the utility bills for those 60-square-meter apartments they just built. And finally, step 4, within just a few years, the entire village regresses right back to its original absolute state of poverty. The author uses this theoretical deduction to claim that eliminating the capitalist didn't improve anyone's life, it just destroyed the entire ecosystem.
Section 4. Real-world economic examples.
Having established his theory through a thought experiment, Xu Feng scales his argument way up to global geopolitics. He points to 3 specific nations that fell from prosperity into severe economic hardship. First up, Argentina. He notes it was once ranked among the world's top 10 economies, so rich, in fact, that Europeans were actually immigrating there, but now 40% of its population lives in poverty. Next, Venezuela. Once the wealthiest country in Latin America thanks to its massive oil wealth, it's now facing mass impoverishment, with over 2 million people fleeing the country. Finally, Zimbabwe. It was once known as the breadbasket of Southern Africa, and now it's one of the poorest countries in the world. Xu Feng boldly attributes the downfall of all 3 of these nations to one root cause: the elimination or driving out of capitalists. To further solidify his claim, he points to what are essentially history's great A-B tests: divided nations. He compares South Korea with North Korea and the former West Germany with East Germany. The author argues that the nations on side A, South Korea and West Germany, kept their capitalists and, as a direct result, achieved massive economic prosperity. Conversely, the nations on side B, North Korea and East Germany, chose to eliminate capitalists and, according to the author, remained trapped in poverty. So for Xu Feng, both his theoretical deductions and these harsh historical realities point to the exact same unavoidable conclusion. Section 5. The Wealth Creator Argument. This brings us to his final takeaways, synthesizing all his points into a philosophical challenge directed right at you. Imagine you're a poor person and your annual income is $10,000. A capitalist arrives, sets up a business, and because of the economic activity generated, your income shoots up to $100,000. Xu Feng asks a simple question: is it better to have the capitalist or not have the capitalist? Would you really want them gone? He argues that as a poor person, if you're directly benefiting from the economic engine that the capitalist provides, driving them away makes absolutely zero logical sense. Xu Feng states that the capitalist isn't a saint, and if they work hard and live a lavish lifestyle, well, that's their own business. The core takeaway he pushes is that the poor should focus strictly on their own financial gains. If your own life is drastically improving, why let jealousy over someone else's mansions or first-class flights destroy the very system that's pulling you out of poverty? He ends his essay by addressing a common counterargument: the idea that people don't need capitalists because they can just rely on the government to provide for them. Well, Xu Feng dismisses this idea entirely with a really sharp, provocative thought, stating the government is a consumer of wealth, not a creator of it. He argues that relying on a consumer to increase your wealth is basically like relying on a thief to make you rich. Ultimately, Xu Feng's stance is unwavering. The only true path to prosperity for the poor is to embrace the wealth creators, not eliminate them. It's definitely an uncompromising perspective on how economies actually function from the ground up. I hope this breakdown of his essay gave you some clear insights to chew on. So what do you think? Does true prosperity require us to tolerate extreme wealth inequality? Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how the world works.